So they pretty much nailed it. In my opinion, Silent Hill 2 is a good remake. There are a couple little flaws in there. Some of them I took the time to point out in the game ranks before you buy video. If you did check that out, thank you. But here, after digesting it over the weekend and now more people are getting their hands on the game, just kind of wanted to dive into what I think it really does best. And it's a couple of things. The first thing I think is that it's kind of like a victory for preserving Silent Hill, for keeping Silent Hill in the public conscience. While personally, I still really think if we're talking about preservation, a modern, easily accessible way to play Silent Hill 2 for mainstream audiences, the original version, should be a thing. I really hope Konami does that at some point. That, you know, you can get it on GOG and stuff like that, but just like a good, proper version, like a release of the original version would be good. But at the very least, with this new Silent Hill 2, for me, the important thing is that the atmosphere is preserved. The feeling, the creativity behind Silent Hill 2 is a thing again, and now it's available for more people to see. Now, if I sound like I'm like a little up my ass with this, I'm just trying to say that, you know, there's nothing really else like Silent Hill 2, the tone, the atmosphere, the look, the type of horror, the grotesqueness of it, the moodiness of it. There's nothing else that really quite nails that thing. Since Silent Hill 2 blew up in 2001, it's really been the only thing in media I've seen that really feels like this. Nothing else really feels like Silent Hill. I mean, except the movie, I guess, to a point. But really, for me, as much as Silent Hill 1 and 3 are my favorites, 2 was the big one. 2 was the big hit. 2 was when Silent Hill really caught on. And I think the best thing about this remake is that like the game understands what made the original so important. It didn't lose sight of that. It's the storytelling, yes, but it's also the characters and the mood and just like the of all of it. I know I'm not very good with words. I'll just make sounds. I'll be the first to admit, like I said it on the Friends Per Second podcast, with it not being on like a low res CRT television and like, without the camera angles and the Dutch camera angles and, it doesn't have that crunchiness, that real griminess that the original has. But what it does have is incredible sound design, better than the original game in some instances. The music is there. The music is maintained, preserved. There's some remixes and good stuff like that. And then the visuals. And I do think here it's not just, ooh, it's pretty and shiny now. I think in the remake, the visuals have really, really done a good job heightening things, specifically the horror level. I think this new Silent Hill 2 is actually genuinely kind of scary at points. You're walking around all these creepy environments. It's dark. And that's the thing. It's the use of darkness here. Now, stop me if you've heard this already. I did say this somewhere else, but when you played Splinter Cell for the first time and like you shot out a light bulb or you switched the lights off and saw the game go really dark, like darker than you've seen in a video game, and just how the developers use that darkness as a way for it to like feel like you're sneaky, and how it works mechanically, visually, all that. Here with Silent Hill, I think the use of darkness is so good because it adds to like this claustrophobic nature, this weird, crazy nature here. So, the environments you visit here, the prison, the hospital, the apartments, all that, they are bigger. They are bigger than the original game. The layout is changed and you have a map. But you're constantly accessing that map because the game world can just be so disorienting. And I think some of that is, they're designed to kind of trick you a little bit, but also the fact that it's dark and you're always just kind of freaking out or looking for something hiding around the next corner. The claustrophobic nature for me really works with the flashlight, your dinky flashlight. It sucked in the original, it sucks here, but the developers seem like they know certain moments when to really very conveniently dim that light a little bit. The amount of times in this game where you're walking down a long hallway and suddenly you kind of feel like you're blacking out because, like, I don't know if you've ever blacked out, but like, excuse me. But like, the dark comes from the sides of your eyes or the sides of the screen. So you feel this dark closing in, your flashlight getting dimmer. And it is just such an effective use of light to create tension and spookiness. And honestly, a monster doesn't even need to show up. For me, with the sound hitting, with the lights and everything off, like when you're playing, you got your headphones on, the sound design is really hitting all that. That to me makes for an effective, scary thing. Now, horror is very subjective, right? I always use Blair Witch Project as an example. Blair Witch Project came out, blew some people away. They thought it was the scariest thing they've ever seen, and then other people thought it was total bullshit. Horror is different for everybody. Some people like thinking about things, not seeing things, and it sends a shiver down their spine. Some people need Pennywise to go, ah, and that's scary for them. Different strokes for different folks, but with Silent Hill 2, the type of horror I like, that like unsettling, just kind of like back of your neck thing, the fear of the unknown sometimes, they really, really do that well here. And the environments are great, especially like you notice right from the beginning with the apartments and stuff, because you see apartments, you go into different rooms that are clearly apartments that different people lived in. You'll see one that has like wheelchair accessible stuff. You'll see one apartment that has shit everywhere. You'll see one that's totally clean and empty. And they just do a good job with that detail. They take advantage of like having the power to just add detail to all this stuff that really works. There's more interiors you can enter, it feels like, and Silent Hill as the town, I think still maintains that like it does feel like a distinct small American town. Silent Hill 1 and 2 really did a good job with that back in the day. There were things in those games that you would see that like you didn't see in other games. It was kind of like Midwest, behind the houses, back alleys with the garages and the garbage cans and stuff like that. You know, you don't usually see that replicated as well in stuff, you know, houses, front porches, American flags, just like how it looks, how they really get it here just felt pretty good. And with the fog, of course, it makes it all better. I do think the fog could have been a little thicker, but that's just me. I think the other thing that needs work is the game. There's other stuff you can unlock, but like at the start, you have the option to switch between the regular visuals and the 90s style filter. That filter to me mutes the colors, pares things down. It also adds a vignette on the sides. I think that vignette is a little too strong, in my opinion. It works good when you're in interiors because it makes it even more claustrophobic and stress-inducing. But I don't know, that filter didn't work as well for me as I would have hoped. And I think that's the other thing with that original Silent Hill 2 that you lose out on, right? Is like the camera, the Dutch camera angles, the weird stuff when characters are talking. For me, the dreamlike feeling of the whole thing is still somewhat maintained because characters just show up. They say weird things. Things move on. Things just happen. And that works. But I think what makes it more dreamlike is, and stick with me here, is that James as a character is more realistic. He's way more compelling. He actually shows like real genuine emotion, but he's still kind of cold and unreactive sometimes to certain things in the game, which just works here because that's kind of how it was in the original. So by adding, they're not really taking anything away. Some of the characters, like, you know, James's face, Maria's face, like they take some getting used to, but I like that little characters get a couple of extra little things here and there, a couple little extra lines. I've compared this game a lot to the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I think they just use that as a blueprint for like ratios of things, like changing level design, changing this, adding to this, not adding to that, you know? So kind of like how Leon and Claire got a little bit of extra character moments together. You get little bits of things here and there, but for me, the thing that really sold it was James. I think the actor who portrays James does a really, really good job. The facial expressions, the voice acting here just really, really works and elevates the entire thing. Because now looking back at Silent Hill 2, as much as James's story is incredible, the character himself, him on screen, him talking, didn't really ever do as much for me. It was always the other people around him and the actual story itself. But now it's all like, it feels like it's like 100% locked in because he is actually way more interesting on screen. But in terms of interesting, the gameplay stuff is also pretty good. I mean, they changed some boss battles, but mostly to make them better, make them a little bit more compelling. A lot of old Silent Hill stuff was just slow things lumbering towards you and you filling them with bullets. Now there's a little bit more here and there. It's never over the top crazy cinematic or thrilling that it kind of loses the feel of Silent Hill. In my opinion, it's like just enough. They add just enough sauce to it to make it a little bit more interesting for, you know, the 21st century. One thing I really, and I can't believe I'm going to say this because I'm not usually like a big puzzle guy. I love survival horror games. You guys know I've talked about Resident Evil is like one of my favorite things ever, but I'm never like a big puzzle guy. Like they're just there and I'm like, okay, cool, I do them. I really like the puzzles here. I liked how they expanded upon original puzzle ideas. I like how they added new puzzles. And I kind of like how they added new puzzles where it was like sometimes you would just walk through a room in the original game. And now they would use that room for either a big set piece, like a little conversation with the characters to add a little flavor, but also a puzzle. And I think the puzzles just had a really, really good balance of being pretty tough for me. Like I always joke like I'm not very smart. So for me, I had to rack my brain on a lot of this stuff. And a couple of things stumped me for a little while. But then figuring it out and getting it, they felt fair, they felt reasonable, and just enough for me to go, I am smart. It's a good feeling. But it was the fact that they added more. I didn't expect that, and I thought that was cool. Also, again, like with like creeping around these hallways and then like slowly walking around and getting the ropes of things, the enemies hiding, I think, are really, really effective and really, really well done. Because they're not always completely like jump scares. Like they don't always feel cheap, but like there are enemies that are like hiding up against corners. There are enemies tucked under tables. And a lot of the times the game does a really good job of you actually turning and pointing and looking, and it doesn't look like there's anything there, but then you realize an enemy's there and you go, oh shit, and then your flashlight flickers. Just like really, really good horror thing, execution there. Not only because it's not a cutscene, it's gameplay, and it's like you have those organic, good, genuine scare moments. You know, I didn't love everything because the combat is sometimes clunky. When you do get like an enemy that sneaks up on you, or you do get cornered in a room with two enemies, it kind of falls apart. It feels really messy. The camera will get stuck. You won't see an enemy hitting you. It's sloppy. But where the combat is good is when it's you and another enemy and they're tough. They still manage to feel unpredictable and kind of imposing hours in after you've seen that enemy type. Like it's always just kind of a crapshoot. And I like that. And every fight for me, maybe it was the difficulty I was playing on, but like it felt like a desperate struggle. And every time I beat an enemy, I was like, fuck. And I like stomped them out a couple of times. Like that stomp mechanic in games like Dead Space and here and stuff like that, just really good. And I know it's good because like I'm using it naturally. Like I'm using it like to get my feeling out in a way. That's impressive. It's stuff like that, man. And I am 50-50 with Bloober. I've expressed my skepticism of them nailing this game. I meant it specifically from it being lightning in a bottle. You know, Silent Hill 2 is a tricky one. The Japanese influence, the uniqueness of the style, the sensitivity of the story, all that. I wasn't sure if it could be remade. And Bloober Team, I'm 50-50 on their games. I like some of them. I don't like some of them. I like Layers of Fear. The medium I thought was okay. It had some interesting bits, but I certainly did not like their Blair Witch game, as now I'm talking about Blair Witch Project again. But yeah, so I wasn't sure, but I think this is a really good effort. I also want to say, like, the hardcore fans will always have their nitpicks, and I think that, you know, this will not replace the original. This is a new, interesting way to get into Silent Hill. And if anything, I'm just happy about that because it goes back to what I was saying at the start. The best thing about the game is that it keeps that Silent Hill thing going. And it's not a shitty game. The fog, the atmosphere, the mood, the grotesque psychosexual enemies, and the feeling, the depression behind the story, the music, all of those things combined, you don't see in movies, in a television show. So that Silent Hill, in my opinion, kind of has a lock and exclusivity on those things, and it was dead for so long. So for this game, even with some flaws, to get that back in the current landscape, I'm in. Now, I say that as someone who, you know, I really enjoyed Silent Hill 2, but 1 and 3 are my favorites. So the question is what happens now? Are they just going to keep remaking stuff? Or do we want something new in the world of Silent Hill? That's what I want. We know that Konami is working on projects, but for now, this is a good, entertaining thing to play through, especially on Halloween. The game is longer than the original. There's a bit more to do and chew on. And then, of course, it's a survival horror game, so you're going to want to replay it at least once. So I recommend you play it at some point. If you are jumping into it, I would love to know what you think in the comments, how you're feeling on it so far. If you've already made your way through it completely, I want to know what you're thinking. There's a lot of shit that's been kind of going around about this game that is just not true. And now that it's fully released and people are actually playing it and judging it for themselves, I'm happy to see that. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you haven't played it yet, but you just have Silent Hill feelings, thoughts. Are you like me? Do you like 1 and 3 a lot? Like, just let me know what you're thinking about this game at all. If you get what I'm trying to do here, man, I'm just talking about stuff I love. I'm just yapping. And that's what I did for like 16, 17 minutes now. So thank you for sticking around. That's it. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.